Welcome to Vitality, where yesterday's troubles are forever forgotten. Struggling with the loss of a loved one, a traumatic incident, an embarrassing social mistake, whatever your trauma, sign up for our Memory Cleanse programs today.
Register for our Memory Cleanse therapy today. Call now to meet with a Memory Cleanse advisor to find out if memory deletion is right for you.
Well, welcome to the Down and Cut. I am excited to have a guest. Caden Butera is a North Idaho-based film director and owner of Paradox Studios, known for his upcoming sci-fi feature Recollection and the rom-com Swap Me Baby. Available right now on Amazon, Apple TV, Vudu, and Tubi. He gained attention for his short films, including Moon Knight, a fan film, and the sci-fi short film Recursion, featured on the Dust Channel. Caden, welcome to the Down and Cut. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited.
I'm excited to actually get to know you and meet you because, first of all, like, again, internet's so vast, and we see your films and things that come across, and we're like, oh, that looks really polished, and that's really funny. And I think the one thing I got to say is I'm excited because I know you have a sense of humor, and I appreciate that.
Thanks, man.
And I know there's a lot of people in the industry who are pretty serious and just kind of focused, and are not into. I know actors that won't do comedies.
Yeah.
So your stuff is very polished. I'm gonna let you talk about everything, and so I'm gonna start shooting out questions for you. But let's go to the very beginning. Like, what came first? Was it editing, writing, or directing? And how did it all start? How did you go into this
Right.
craft?
Well, basically, it all kind of happened out of once by necessity. Where I started doing film since I was like 10 years old, and I certainly didn't know any editors or writers when I was 9. I had to, kind of put on all the hats. So if I wanted a movie to get made, if you can call it a movie, back then it was pretty rough. But if you wanted something to be done, you had to do it yourself. And fortunately, after a couple of years of roping in my brother and my poor friends to be the actors and hold the camera, I've eventually gotten to work with some really talented collaborators. But first starting out, I was my own everything just by desperation. So all that being said, I call myself a director / writer right now more than anything, but I do still dabble in all the professions in little bits there.
You're editing your own films as well, though,
I
right?
am, yes. Currently, I am still my main editor, and I co-write most of my things with my brother, who's my main collaborator and also composer. And yeah, I'm still kind of working on learning to delegate. One day I'm probably not going to be my own editor, but for now, that's kind of where I'm at.
That's awesome. So, like, did you take courses at school, high school, college? How did this all, like, or did you learn your skill set other than just doing? Even though that's a very important skill
Right.
set.
So for me, I never attended film school. I just attended films as they say, just going to the movie theater and with a pad and paper, metaphorically, and just really trial by fire, making lots and lots and lots of really bad films, and then taking note at why they were so bad, getting frustrated about my inability to do something, and through that failure and trial and error, eventually landing on something that I didn't hate. And it's been kind of a repeated process from failure all the way up until where we are now, which is, trying your hardest at something, being willing to fail, but giving it your all.
That's a true testament, because I think a lot of people who are starting to come into the industry or want to get into it, they're like, well, I don't have a degree, I don't have the training. But I think you're a prime example who not only has probably one of the most polished short films that I've seen out there amongst the
Thank you.
masses, but right there, and you're hitting beats, you're hitting action, you're hitting comedy. Uh, is it
Yeah.
It's just like ringing my bell. I mean, that's a little bit on a little bit of the horror side, the suspense side, the thriller side as well. And I think that's a true testament. I want to say something about comedy. I think that's the first thing. Like John Thick is hilarious to me. It really is. And the teacops are hilarious to me. I mean, I appreciate comedy. I've always been in love with comedy. And so how do you develop the concepts? Where does that come from? Like your experiences as a writer, does it influence the way you direct as well? And then how do you balance these roles in each film that you
Right. That's a good
create?
question. I mean, when it comes to comedy, I mean, when it comes to be honest, everything you just asked, I'm still figuring it out. I might change my entire process tomorrow, but right now I'm kind of doing a mixed bag of all the above. Specifically with comedy, to me, it entirely depends on the style of comedy when it comes to my process. So you mentioned my Teacops videos, which are, it's basically some 5-minute short films that are heavily wordplay based and puns and just really bad kind of physical gags, kind of pulling from the style of comedy from like Airplane and Naked Gun. Those are super fun to write, but my kind of trick for that one is those are random gags that just come to me out of nowhere in the middle of a Tuesday, and then I write it down into my little Apple Notes, and then I go, we'll see if this is funny a month from now. And then when it comes to, okay, we're actually gonna make a short film, I some of it is, of course, coming up with the story on the spot and coming up with the structure and all of that stuff that kind of has to come about once you sit in the chair in front of the keyboard. But when it comes to those really specific gags, I want to say 75% of them were like the inception for the gag came like a year ago, and I wrote it down in my notes, and then I found a way to see if I could, for lack of a better word, shoehorn it into the script. Now, I don't know if that's the actual way comedies like that are written. When it comes to less pun-based comedy, like I've done some comedy that's more like situational comedy and comedy from character, that is so hard to come up with in a bubble ahead of time. I have to kind of come up with it while I'm in front of the keyboard and while I'm talking to people about the specific story. So I guess long story short, for me, I'm still figuring it out, and it's different for every style of comedy.
And I've noticed that you also reuse some of the same actors in other projects and keep moving forward. When you're doing something like John Thick, was it hard to keep everyone together without cracking up, or was it how many? I think you spoil a lot of takes that way, or
Yes.
how did that work out?
The short answer is yes. One of my main collaborators is a man named Max Jordan. Shout out to him. He is a really talented VFX artist and cinematographer, and also has a really good hand on action choreography and action design. And so he was John Thick himself, the actor, and he doesn't really call himself an actor per se, although as you can tell, he's got the chops for it. He was helping me do some cinematography, some action choreography, and he was the guy who had to do all of it with a straight face, and that was the hardest for him out of out of all the tasks he had to do. He was really struggling with that one. But we somehow got through it, and it was a blast for that project specifically. Everything is so heightened and fun, and we're throwing food at each other. Maybe not as fun for the people getting the food in the face, but the ones throwing it having a blast. So yeah,
But they're all in it together, right? They're here to make a really good project.
yeah.
And see what. What needs to
Exactly.
happen.
I mean, basically going back to your point about you see a lot of the same faces pop up in a lot of my projects. I think you see that happen all over, you know, whether it's like the lowest tier filmmakers all the way up to like the Chris Nolans who keep going back to the same people. And I just like any profession, there's lots of awesome people in the world, and there's lots of, you know, a-holes in the world. And once you find someone that's awesome and you love, and you're friends with them, and you can speak the same language, you hold them close and you never let them go. And that's kind of what I'm learning is once you find a collaborator that you click with, and you love as a person, like why shop around for another person when you've got one right at your side, you know. So not to say that working with other people is frowned upon either. Of course, you have to stretch your legs and find new collaborators all the time for one reason or another. But yeah, I love finding friends and then working with my friends. That's the best way to go, in my opinion.
So when you're writing a script, you have them in mind, and you're actually writing lines for them with their personality and mannerisms.
Sometimes I'm writing something having no idea who we're gonna get to play them, and like, oh dear God, I hope we find someone good, you know. Other times, yeah, I've known ahead of time that this was written for this specific person, and even then, there are times where that specific person got COVID or something like that, and we had to all these lines that I'd written for one person in mind, suddenly I'm having to switch. And it's a good test of, was I writing this because I really wanted hear my friends say it, or was I writing this because the story needed it to be said, you know? And if you're technically letting story dictate first and then the person saying the line after, in theory, you always have a safety net.
So now let's switch gears to Recollection. Like, what inspired you to create this film, and what's the message or theme that you hope audiences will take away from
Yeah,
it?
great question. So Recollection has been pretty much the largest project, for better or worse, that I've ever done. It's my second feature film that I've ever directed, but my first that I've also produced in-house, based off a script that I had a hand in. And so basically this one has been a long time coming. I started the very first draft back when it had a different title, way back in, I want to say like 2018, I think. And I've been just really wanting to write a piece of science fiction that can still move people and have a humanity to it. And back in 2018, I was, you know, younger, had written less, and I wrote my first draft, thought it was great, handed it off to some collaborators and went, ta-da, what do you think? And I got some pretty honest feedback that was like, I like the idea, I like where you're coming from, but maybe go back to some rewrites. And basically, that at the time I was, I think, like 19 or something like that, and I my shallow 19-year-old ego had a massive blow from those comments. But instead of giving up, I decided, you know what, I think it's worth it to push forward. And basically, I ended up rewriting this thing about, I think, 5 or 6 times before we landed on the Recollection that we ended up shooting. And so the long story short is, Recollection is a sci-fi thriller that is in a not too distant future dystopia where every single person in the world has a new part of their routine, which is when something bad happens to you, just delete it from your head. We have memory cleansing technology where if you have the mildest inconvenience or you have some traumatic incident in your childhood, just go to this memory booth and get it taken care of. And we follow our lead character, Kate, who basically one day gets all of these memories back all at once and uncovers a conspiracy within the company that deletes your memories. And next thing you know, she's on a high stakes action thriller adventure trying to uncover her past. So that's kind of the log line for the film. And we've been working on it really hard, and we're in post production now, and we're looking for like some film festival releases later this year. Knock on wood.
It's a feature, correct?
Yeah, it's under 2 hours, just under 2 hours, and it stars Eric Roberts is in it, which is super exciting, from The Dark Knight and from like a million things. I don't even know where to start. Val Kenshill's in it, who's Hawkman in the DC CW shows, and Rosalind Luke is the lead, and Cesar Garcia from Breaking Bad, the late great Gary Graham from Star Trek Enterprise. We got some fun names in there, and it was just a blast to shoot, despite the very heavy subject matter. I'm really excited for people to finally see it, because I've been just keeping it on my computer in secret for 3 years now.
3 years. You've been post for 3 years.
That was an exaggeration. We finished shooting it almost exactly 2 years ago, and we've been getting it through post. All things considered, we've been on a speedy track. But when I look back, it's been longer than maybe how long Hollywood takes to produce movies. I mean, a Marvel movie, they can shoot a movie and they can pump it out in 8 months. It's insane, you know.
Right.
Right. Here in the indie film world, we have to take a little more time, I guess, depending on what your process is. You don't have to. We did. So get off my back about it.
Well, there's a lot of visual effects, and that takes time.
Yeah, there's some visual effects. There's we're doing the composing in-house, because my brother is the composer, and this is his first feature that he's ever composed. And so what we lack in maybe speediness, we make up, and hopefully quality. That's the philosophy anyway.
And forgive my Asian accent. I said Recollection.
Oh yeah, no, that's fine. Well, however you want to say it. Recollection.
Recollection. So, speaking of your brother, can you discuss any challenges and rewards working closely with your brother? It's Rylan.
Yes, Rylan Butera. I mean, he's like I mentioned before, he's the guy who helped co-write the script with me. He was basically in my ear behind the monitor every single day on set. And then into post-production, he's been writing an all original score. And so it is an amazing experience, as you would expect, because he's my brother and we are so comfortable with each other. You know, we can bicker maybe more than anyone else, but that's also why I think we are good collaborators, is because, I'm going to speak on his half for a second, but neither of us take the bickering personally, and we're able to speak more honestly than with each other than anyone else. Not to say that, you know, you have to like lie to your collaborators, but when you're family and you know how each other speaks so well because you've known each other since birth, you don't necessarily have to strategically sugarcoat every single constructive criticism you have to give. And both of us know the shorthand of when we like something, when we don't like something, and it's even more rewarding when we can surprise each other with something that we've done. And so it's been an incredible experience working with Rylan, and he just actually finished his full first pass of the movie with all music 2 days ago. So I was really proud of him for doing that.
Now, I'm sure that shorthand also goes to your cast and crew.
Yes,
as well,
yes,
right?
100%.
They work with each other. You start to know that before, and constructive criticism where you know it's not going to offend them, it's not going to step on their toes. I love to take a
right. No, that's you're 100% right. It's so interesting too, because as a director, your job is to go around and be like, yes, yes, no, good, bad, And so it's kind of the job of the director of how do you do that effectively, but also with kindness, but not so much kindness that you're just telling everyone, sure, good job, I'm afraid to tell you what I really think. And so fortunately, I I'm surrounded by really talented people, so it's not like anyone's dropping the ball or anything. But my job is kind of to steer the ship one direction or another. And when I was first put in front of some of these stars that I'd never met before, and I was told, okay, it's your job to correct them when they do something that you're not a fan of, like working with Eric Roberts for the first time. Like, I was kind of wondering this about myself. Do I have the balls to give Eric Roberts the same direction that I'd be able to with my friends, And I was so put at ease day one, on how he's just, Eric Roberts is a really nice guy in general, but Eric Roberts is a veteran actor and he knows how this works. He's not taking it personally unless you're going out of your way to mix personal insults in with your direction. Like he knows how to take direction and what the game is like. And it really is something that I'm still working towards getting out of my head about, of giving people constructive criticism without being afraid that I'm being a meanie,
Yeah. Well, let's talk about how many gatekeepers did you have to go through to get some well-known actors on your
right.
on your film?
Surprisingly not as many as you'd expect when it comes to following the process of just reaching out to their agents and making sure that you come with the materials that they expect, so you don't look like a noob, and then providing them with what is hopefully a script that inspires them in some way. And that's how pretty much how we got most of our stars, so to speak, on this film, was just reaching out to their agent, providing them with a script and telling them why we think they'd be a good fit. And there's some people you never hear back from. That's kind of how it goes. But we were really fortunate to be able to get so many people on board because they were inspired by the script in some regard. So that was really exciting.
Did you have any financial backers kind of help you support?
Yeah. So this film was it's partially self-funded and then also through private investors as well, which those two things together helped us get the budget for the film, which I still don't know if I'm like supposed to say it publicly yet or not until we've sold the thing. Not that I'm trying to be secretive, but
Sure.
I mean,
I know it sounds like it's pretty routine.
Yeah.
In what you're saying.
And with that budget ahead of time, it helped us, kickstart the pre-production process. But all things considered, we're an indie film. We don't have the cash to throw at people that the Marvel or the Disneys do. It's really coming down to not yet. Fingers crossed. Is hopefully appearing like someone that would be cool to work with for the next 3 weeks. In addition to hopefully a good enough paycheck and a story that inspires you. It's got to be all three when you're working with this level of money, which is not a lot.
Yeah. Did you film on location in your neck of the woods, or did you have to go to any other studios?
So yes, we filmed the entire feature film all within an hour of my house. So basically we're talking Spokane, Washington, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and Post Falls, and Sandpoint. And so it was in a lot of ways really, really convenient. In some ways, not as much, because all these stars that we're pulling from, a lot of them are from LA, so if you bring someone from LA, they're not gonna, stay in a cardboard box for their stay. You have to, put them up. So every time you bring someone from out of your area, it's just more money that's going towards like hotels, as it should be. You want them to be comfortable. But that could have gone to like a shiny, cool prop for the film, So you just gotta have to. Everything is a trade off of where you want to spend your money on, and fortunately, I think where we were able to spend our budget really elevated elevated the story, from the standpoint of yes, it would have been awesome to drop a huge amount of money on the craziest camera in the world, or we could split our money between some really, really good stars that are and acting talent that's gonna heighten the story. And if the story is really coming through, who really cares about how shiny your camera is? I mean, granted, you want your movie to look good, and I'm not dissing our camera department. They did an incredible job, but we try as an indie film company to put story at the forefront of all of our decision making.
What kind of cameras did you use? Were they Reds?
We talked about it. It was a long conversation of are we going to do Reds, or are we going to rent the big Arri Alexa? And then at the end of the day, we decided to use a Blackmagic. So we're shooting on Blackmagic Ursa Generation 2s, and then the Pocket 6K actually. And really, we're kind of at a crossroads in pre-production with my DP, where do we want to spend a bunch of money on a cool lens kit and camera kit, or do we want to be able to spend money on our lighting kit? And we decided to put most of our money into lighting, because in our opinion, if you have a really strong lighting kit and you know how to use it and you have a strong aesthetic, you can get by with a lot more than if it was the other way around. If you're shooting on the best camera in the world but you don't know how to light the image, then it might look like a really subpar camera. So I'm hoping we can fool the audience into thinking we have better cameras than we actually did.
It's working. What would you say, as an editor, how do you approach the process of shaping the film's narrative and pacing to align with your directorial vision?
Good question. I mean, I'm still trying to figure that one out too, to be honest. It's definitely a learning process. With Recollection specifically, that was a question I asked myself every single day, because we ended up arriving at a problem that is fairly common, where you shot a movie longer than you actually wanted it to be. And you're at that point, you kind of have two choices. Go, screw it. It's so amazing. My movie deserves to be 5 hours long, and everyone else who doesn't think so is stupid, which very few directors are in a position to do that. And even so, it's not always the right choice anyway. And then there's the choice of, okay, I think that this movie is great and I really like the pacing, but the runtime is longer than it should be. And even though I love it, I'm getting notes back that it's feeling a little long, which was the instance for us. And so I had kind of the impossible choice of like, okay, what do I take out? Which scenes or which parts of scenes am I going to start to trim down? And that was a really hard thing for me, because before this, I had done an 1.5-hour comedy, which had no problems with runtime. If anything, it was a little short. And then the short films, which have no real consequence to if you upload a 7-minute short film versus an 8-minute short film when we're talking YouTube audiences. So this was a really tricky moment for me. And I will say, I actually ended up really learning that you don't have to be as precious as you'd think. And so I was able to cut out, I want to say it was like 15 minutes, 16 minutes of runtime to get it under that 2 hour mark. And I honestly think that the movie is better for it. I think I was getting maybe a little too precious, letting things breathe for maybe way longer than it should have. But we landed at a spot where I'm really happy with it. But I will say there were a few times where we're combing through the movie and, you know, whoever it is, like my brother or another collaborator, not to throw anyone under the bus, they say, hey, this spot, we're looking at this character for a long time. Do we have to? And sometimes I go, yes. Yeah, sometimes you have to know when to hold your ground, and knowing when to and when not to is the hardest thing in the world. Yeah. And I'm still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, it's definitely a balancing act of that experience. What are you making cameos in your films too?
I'll say in our last one, Recollection, yes, by pure desperation again. There were 2 instances where we were supposed to have an extra, and for one reason or another they canceled, and I'm like, screw it, I'm gonna put on the costume and line up the shot, Max, tell me how it looks. So I am in this movie hilarious. Twice, technically 3 times for eagle-eyed viewers, very subtly, but I do get a little bit of a cameo, but it was not planned.
What would you say the most significant changes in the indie filmmaking landscape are, and since you've started, like, what has progress? How has it affected the way you work?
Oh man, these are really solid questions. I just gotta say right now,
it's all about you. This is about people to get to know who you are.
Thanks, man. Well, I mean, I'm sure we've all heard it from a million different other people's mouths, but from entertainment in general, we're in a spot now where there is just more content now than ever before on more platforms and streaming services than ever before. And I think in some ways that's really detrimental. But in other ways, it really forces artists to find a new creative, spicy way to cut through the noise. In a sense that if you're going to make a sci-fi thriller, and if you were making one in 1990, there was probably this is a wrong number, but there was probably 87 made that year. Now in the year 2024, right, there is 532 sci-fi thrillers made every year. So if you are going to sit down and actually pull the trigger on a sci-fi thriller, you better be damn sure that it's going to be worth your time and hopefully worth the audience's time, because you're competing with so much more. And so I think knowing that there's just a giant fountain of competition everywhere you go, I think streamlines the creative process in some regard, and can also, bog you down. And so just depending on the optimistic or pessimistic look you want to take, I think is changing how artists make things. And I don't know yet if it's more for the good or for the bad. I don't know if that answers your question, but those are kind of my...
No, it does. It gives us a perspective, because now the next question is, with that flood of different content, short films everywhere, how do you stay creative and inspired, motivated in your film production process?
Right. I mean, for me, that's a tricky one. I'd say that despite having just 18 million pieces of content screaming in my face all the time, whether it's the short form like the Instagram reels and the YouTube shorts, or the long form, the Netflix shows, there's always something excellent out there. And I know the popular thing these days is to go, and I do it myself too, but the popular thing is to go, oh, back in like 20 years ago, movies used to be great, and now look at the slew of garbage that's out there all the time. And they are not wrong. But I would say
Yeah.
that that's because there is more stuff period made now than ever before, and you just have more stuff to sift through to find those diamonds in the rough. I still believe that there are diamonds in the rough made every single year, maybe arguably the same amount. It's just buried so much easier. And so I think it's an easy way to feel down about the entertainment industry by just looking to your left and looking to your right and going, oh, Aquaman 4 was greenlit. Can't wait. You know, no shade against Aquaman. Just kidding. Big shade against Aquaman. I don't like Aquaman. But I think if you just search a little harder, you can still find great stuff to inspire you. And that's what I try to do, is I try not to obsess over all the bad stuff that I don't like, and sift through until I find something good. And I always do. It just takes me a little longer.
It reminds me of one weekend I was, my wife and kid were out for the weekend. And so I thought I'd sit down and have some time to kind of look at what's happening in the streaming channels. And I swear I could not find anything good to watch. I watched the first 10 minutes. I'm like, okay, this is garbage. What's next? Next 10 I'm like, I ended up rewatching an old film.
Yep.
Because I was
right there
like,
with you.
all this new stuff, it just doesn't. I'm just like, what is happening? So
it's option paralysis.
Speaking
too,
in that realm, but it's like the trailer. You watch the trailer, you're like, okay, that looks promising, and then you start watching the movie, and you're like, okay, this is boring. I get to that point. What do you think about the technology and platforms like Amazon, Apple TV, and Vudu? How does it play in evolution of independent filmmaking?
Yeah, I mean, and overall, I feel like because more stuff is made more than ever before, you need more people to make the stuff. And so I think there are more filmmakers more than ever before. And so the the gatekeepers of making a movie, they were so large before, and now, like, if worst comes to worst, you can make a movie and show it somewhere. Like, YouTube exists now, where at the very least you can probably get 30 people to watch something you made, versus, if you were a filmmaker in the 1980s, like, if you couldn't get your film shown at a local festival and you didn't work for Paramount, there was no TikTok to upload it to, so, like, my overall opinion is that it is more exciting, more opportunities for more creatives to get employed. But it also is, again, the flip side. You have just so much more competition to cut through now. It's like, oh, I have a pilot for a comedy starring a talking dog, and it's like, oh, buddy, I have 3 talking dog comedies on my desk right now. So there's more stuff to cut through. So I think it's a trade on, trade off. And it's ever changing. So I too am curious about if it's more of a good or more of a bad. I don't know.
So what's your end goal? I mean, your level of quality is so high up there. Is the end goal to go to Hollywood to eventually purchase that domain, or do you want to stay in your neck of the woods and continue to create and have a lot of actors and producers and everyone at your side?
Well, thank you. My end goal, honestly, has always been to make movies that I really, really like and get paid to do it enough to I can live comfortably and then make the next one. And so, and that's pretty broad, from the standpoint of whether it's me having to, like, scrounge up funding for it every time, or whether it's me getting hired to direct someone else's film in LA or Minnesota or Alaska. I don't at the end of the day really care, as long as I'm making movies that I like and I'm getting pay comfortably for them and enough to make the next one. So right now that is sticking around in my neck of the woods, which is the Pacific Northwest. If it turns to having to move to LA to pursue that, or to change identity and move to Mexico, I don't really care. as long as I'm getting to make movies that that I like and I'm having fun with. So it's kind of wherever the wind takes me, and when I say wind, I mean however Recollection goes, whether people hate it or people love it, or I break even on it. The next chapter of my career is kind of up in the air right now.
Obviously, as a writer and director, you kind of have all the control. You have all the keys to the kingdom to a certain degree, right? Obviously, investors have to pay things so then it'll deliver. But there's a component of trust at that point. But if you went to LA, are you willing to give up some of that control where you're just a director and kind of almost like, I mean, you've heard the horror stories, right? You have the corporate over your shoulder saying, no, I'm not going to do that shot, or we're cutting budget on this. If you do that, you don't. How do you feel about that?
That's it's a question that I ask myself all the time, because I've been fortunate enough thus far to not really have to bend the knee to a giant corporate overlord, so to speak. I mean, I've done client work and like freelance videography, but at the end of the day, I'm not really passionate about cutting 2 seconds off this shot for a commercial, you know? But when it comes to like an actual creative narrative story that maybe originally came from my brain in some way, and then I have an outside source going, yeah, but this is too slow for 14 to 16-year-olds, you know? Like, how am I going to react when I start getting that feedback? And I think it's, you know, tricky for everyone, and I think it depends on how satisfied you are in the process versus the product. And I'll say that the first feature I ever got to direct, it was, like you mentioned at the top, a rom-com called Swap Me Baby, which was a blast to shoot. It also starred Falk Henschel, who's in Recollection, and he's in Night and Day and all sorts of awesome stuff. He and his very pregnant wife in real life asked me to direct a movie that they were producing and that Falk had written with a writer buddy of his, which was about him swapping bodies with his pregnant wife. And I was like, I'm in. This sounds super fun. I've never directed a feature before. Let's do it. And it was honestly a blast. And it was the first time I had ever, in a long format, directed someone else's script. And so I learned a lot about what that felt like. And overall, I actually enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I did. That being said, there were parts of it that scratched an itch that I didn't know I had, and then other parts it left me with an itch to scratch. It's a weird metaphor. But from the standpoint of, in some ways, when I am directing or working on someone else's work, a weird thing in my head goes off where if this doesn't work out or it's not as good as it should be, it's not my fault. From the standpoint of, I let myself off the hook, which I shouldn't do. At the end of the day, a director's job is to put himself on as many hooks as possible and you know, make the best thing they possibly can with their collaborators. And I was realizing that there was times where I really enjoyed the script when I was brought on, but there were times, whether it was on set or in the editing room, where I accidentally, without even knowing it, got just a little complacent because, it wasn't my baby. I was babysitting someone else's. I was creating someone else's script. And so I just need to, because I know that about myself, kind of be careful and know when I accidentally let off the brakes in the creative process and when I push on too hard. And when I get to that spot working with some hypothetical big producer, will I just cave immediately, or will I stand my ground and ruin my own movie? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a really good question, and it's something that can be like the death of a lot of people's careers, I feel like.
Looking at from 9 years old, writing your sci-fi film, a few years, and getting feedback and constructive criticism and kind of feeling that hit, to making these short films, how do you handle criticism now?
After the project is completed.
Yeah. Well, I'll know a lot more once Recollection gets released and everyone either dislikes it or likes it. But I'll say that it's a really tricky thing, because and a problem that I have is kind of equating my self-worth with the quality of whatever project I'm working on. And I'm getting a lot better at separating those two things. And when someone doesn't like a short film or a feature or a script, whatever it is that I work on, and they criticize it, they're criticizing the art piece and not criticizing me, at least most of the time. And
Yeah.
so when I was in a couple months back, and we had finished Recollection's first cut of the film, and we were showing select audiences and like personal friends the cut of the movie, and asking them, please tear it apart, tell me which parts aren't working for you. That was a really tricky part of the process, because until you get that first criticism, it's in theory the best movie ever, like, maybe what's wrong with it, but until you show it to someone and other people voice those critiques, the movie is perfect until people watch it. It's kind of the Schrodinger's cat effect of, if no one watches it, it's the best movie ever. But it's, God, so important to get people to tell you how they feel about your film. It was brutal for me a couple years ago, but I'd like to think I'm getting a lot better at separating the critiques of the art versus insults towards my character. So that's something I work toward more every day.
It's always different when you're giving feedback to an actor or visual effects and say, well, if you tweak it this way or if you do it that way, but it's different when it's turned around at you going, so I didn't really understand this part. What is that? What's happening here? And I mean, did that cause you to kind of go back and re-edit some parts or cut out?
It definitely did. I mean, going back to the idea of, there are times where you have to hold your ground and be like, just because this person says they didn't get it, I'm really hoping that like the next 3 people will, and knowing when to cave and when not to, that being said,
just think about everyone that likes
that's
it.
Literally exactly how we ended up running things, because we were showing it to like 10 people at a time, and I'm like, I just need to know, does everyone feel this way or just you, Joe? So I ended up kind of doing like elementary school style hand raising at a certain point, because I'm like, I just need to know, like, is this the vocal minority here? But yeah, so yeah, we ended up showing it to about like 25 or less people that we personally like vouch for their opinions in some way, or they were people who I've worked with before, or friends of friends, just people that weren't necessarily film connoisseurs, mixed with people who were film connoisseurs, mixed with average random non-film people, because those are the people who are probably going to watch the movie, Right. And so showed it to a variety of different people, and basically looked at the reoccurring patterns in the feedback, because you're always going to get the occasional weird, just this one person hated this guy's shirt. Okay, ignore that. But if 10 people said the first 10 minutes were kind of slow, then we took note of that. And we ended up changing a bunch of things. And not to say that we completely scrambled around the movie and it's entirely different now, but it really did take on a lot of pretty bold changes in the editing room, and not in a way where we were fighting what we shot, but just making more clear what we shot. And I think there's like a difference every time you hear, like, when David Ayer's Suicide Squad from 2016 was destroyed in the edit. I think that's an instance of the script said one thing, they shot one thing, and then the producers were saying something completely different and forced it and molded it into a completely different movie. And that wasn't what happened here. For me, it was like, there is a story here, but it's not coming through. What tweaks and changes can we do to bring that to the forefront? And so we ended up doing, I think, like 7 or 8 different full cuts before we landed on the one we got. And now I'm pretty happy with it.
Have you ever, this is just a random question. Have you ever had someone give you feedback who doesn't know anything about film and just try to give you advice?
Yes. and sometimes it's helpful and sometimes it's not. I heard a quote from someone that I don't remember who it was, whether it was J.J. Abrams, I don't remember, but it stuck with me so hard. And that when a non-film person or someone outside your industry is giving you feedback on your film, listen to what they said they didn't like and then stop listening when they give you the solution. As in, like, if someone says, like, I was confused about this part, you go, okay, great, clearly something's not coming across. But when they say, do you know what would be better is if you, from that point forward, it's like, oh, okay, maybe stop listening at that point, more or less.
Right.
I mean, you got to listen to some people, obviously, but like, listen up when they're telling you something that didn't come across to them. And then when it comes to the specific solution that you can do as an editor, says the non-editor, chances are they might not be on the nose with their suggestion. I really did try to get non-film people to watch the movie too, because if nothing but a bunch of filmmakers are watching the movie, it's kind of like a bunch of musicians listening to jazz, which is, you want to have the common viewer watch the movie because that's who you kind of made it for,
Right. Yeah. And then you run into that little, if it's your group of friends or people that you've worked with before. Oh, it's great. You did a great job.
Yes.
It's beautiful.
Yes.
That's complimentary and they're not being honest with you. Or
right.
Whatever,
that's also a huge part of it that you just hit on is, it's like, oh, how dare my friends love me unconditionally and give me support. But, sometimes it's maybe not helpful when you're actually looking for feedback. So choosing the friends that aren't going to just love it no matter what. Invite them over, It's a whole process of getting feedback on something that you spent so much time on just for someone to go,
Yeah. So tell me, what advice would you give to someone who's a young filmmaker, who is a young writer, a young director, and wants to edit their own films? What kind of path would you kind of guide them through to kind of enhance their skills?
I mean, my main thought is just try your hardest to just get out there and start doing it. And I know that that's been kind of said ad nauseum at this point, but I really do believe that lots of people, including myself when I was starting out, were kind of waiting for that super important person to bump into you on the street and like give you an incredible opportunity to make something or give you the funds to make it. Chances are the only way you're going to be able to bump shoulders with that person is if you make like 15 really mediocre things first. And I'm always afraid of doing something with the intention of, knowing that it's going to be mediocre or knowing it's not going to be great. So I wouldn't say to go out there and intentionally, make something bad just cause, but allowing yourself to fail, but try your hardest again and again, whether it's you've got $20 and two friends with a cool sword prop, make something with that. Take a Saturday and Sunday and see what you can do. And it didn't work out, then do it again 2 weeks later. That's kind of been my method when we did John Thick. It was right after it was like 2 or 3 months after wrapping Recollection, and I was just itching to do something light because Recollection has a lot of heavy drama stuff, and I was like, I technically am pretty broke after doing Recollection, and I shouldn't be doing this right now, but damn it, I really want to make a stupid comedy over the weekend. And so just that's what we did. We got a bunch of people together and put Max in a fat suit, and now we have John Thick. So that's kind of my main takeaway is whenever you can, go out there and make something.
Just do it. How many Twinkies did you guys go through?
The real questions. I think it was not a lot. I think it was like 3, because what you want to do is get as many as possible. But we had like burgers, nacho cheese, Twinkies. I'm trying to remember what else. And we had such a
donut.
Oh, the donuts.
How many donuts?
I feel like it really was like just that, what you see, because it was like if we buy 3 or 4 of each prop, I'm gonna spend so much money, and we had no money. So yeah, we had like three Twinkies, and I think we screwed up the first 2 and got it on the third.
That's awesome. All right, we're gonna wrap this up. I have 2 more questions for you. It's what I ask all the guests. What is your favorite film production tech?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, honestly, this is gonna sound really dumb, but it's just a nice bright light, like a really nice key light. For the longest time, and when I was first starting out, I was so obsessed over getting all sorts of like little gizmos and gadgets, and I wasted so much money buying 18 little things when I just needed to buy like 3 big things. And not to say little gizmos and gadgets aren't helpful. They certainly are. But I'm realizing now on every set that I'm on that the main thing I need is one really bright key light. And then everything else can start to fall into place. And so I want to say when I was getting into videography for the first time, I spent just an obscene amount of money on little like doohickeys and DIY kind of like stands and random things that all of these YouTubers told me to get. And then when I finally got on the set on some more legitimate projects, I was realizing I'm not going to use any of these. Like it's so rare that you need this one random China ball that flickers that you can tie on a ladder. Like I really really kind of spent my money incorrectly, at least for my personal experience. And so like a good key light, specifically like what Aperture is doing these days with the Aperture like 300 and 600Ds, that series, really, really good stuff, and they saved our butts on Recollection all day long.
What does the numbers mean? 600. What does that mean?
I have no idea what they actually mean, because I think it's an arbitrary thing that they came up with, because I don't.
I'm thinking for like new people and people want to get into it. And it's like,
no one knows. It's a mystery. No, I mean,
it's oh,
man. That is true. That's what I was gonna say. Is that it's basically the arbitrary model name that they gave each of their lights. So the 120s are the dimmest. The 300s is brighter. 600 is almost the brightest, and then the 1200s are the brightest ones they sell until they release the 3000 or whatever. But I don't actually.
You start feeling the heat
Yeah,
from the
well,
lights.
they're
and it was
LEDs, so they're actually not as hot as you would expect,
Oh.
which is why I love them. They're
okay.
I mean, you can still burn yourself if you are dumb. But yeah, they're I don't think the number system actually equates to like lumens or anything, unless I'm an actual idiot and they totally do, and I'm spreading misinformation. But I don't know. All I know is when I'm shopping, I go, oh, big number mean bright. That's kind of my philosophy.
That's the one I want. How many zeros are in that one? Yeah, that's the one.
That's
the
basically
one.
how I talk
All
to
right.
Max.
Oh, so he does the shopping for
More or
you.
less. I mean, because he was the DP. He's every now and then he throws some jargon at me, and I'm like, yeah, that's what do you think? You know. There was a time where I really stayed up to date on like the camera lingo and the lens lingo, and I still know it because I have to talk to a certain extent on set. But like, you know, a new camera comes out every day, and people are like, "What do you think of the red flux capacitor 600D?" And I'm like, I have no idea. Is that a toaster? I'm really behind the game now. So
what do you shoot an anamorphic?
I really, really wish I did. I am a huge sucker for pretty anamorphic lenses. That's my favorite look. That being said, they're not super affordable these days. They're getting more and more affordable with every year. But we shot spherical on every project I've ever done, with the exception to John Thick. We actually rented some really cheap but nice anamorphics. And they look pretty. You got the actual anamorphic streaks with the JJ blue flaring. It's really nice.
All right, last question to dock the ship. How do you feel about AI?
Ooh, that is a good question. My overall thoughts are maybe less cynical than the average filmmaker. I know lots of people are rejecting it hardcore. And don't get me wrong, I'm not like opening up the door for AI to come in and, you know, take my job and everyone else's. But in a lot of ways, it is a tool that if you don't reject it, it can help you get to your creative vision cheaper and faster within reason. I don't think that language-based AIs like ChatGPT, using that to like co-write your script, I'm not a fan of that. I think that is coward's way out, in my opinion. But I do think utilizing it for more of the visual side of maybe visual effects, using artificial intelligence to like remove a chair that was in a shot, you can do in seconds, which just before, like last year, you had to have a lot of time frame by frame and asking a visual effects artist to do it. And now, I mean, it sucks for VFX artists, but it opens up indie filmmakers like Joe Schmo, who can't afford a VFX artist, doesn't know any VFX artists, and now he can accomplish something that, you know, say just big studios were able to do 10 years ago. And so I think that is really exciting. I just hope that it doesn't become a vehicle to complacency and not just letting your hands off the wheel. I think a human should always have their hands on the wheel when it comes to their creative choices, but sometimes the technical execution can really be helped with artificial intelligence. That's kind of my overall thought.
Good answer. What when can we see Recollection? When does that come out? What festivals are you hitting? Are you hitting all the festivals across the New York, LA?
Right. So we are, like I said, almost done in post-production. We have just a few more I's and T's to cross. Ryland's gonna do some revisions in the music, and we've got some final sound mixing and color grading and VFX to do. But we are already submitting to a bunch of film festivals, like too many to name, and I've forgotten most of them, to be honest. I have a list somewhere, but we're trying to hit as many as we can. There are a lot of prestigious ones that are really tricky to get into, and we're not going to be disappointed when we don't, but we are trying our hardest to submit to as many as we can. And hopefully we will have a movie hitting film festivals in a couple months here. And so in the meantime, to stay updated on the film itself and when people can see it and when it's going to get released on a streaming platform, because eventually it will, fingers crossed, be hitting a platform of some kind. That will be very soon, and you can follow us on our social media handles, which are just Recollection Film on Instagram, Recollection Film on Facebook, Recollection Movie is actually the Instagram one. I think I screwed up, but I'm sure I have a link.
We'll put the links.
Okay,
We'll put the
cool.
links in the show notes. Yeah. And then where can people reach you if they want to be
A part of your project.
Yeah.
If they want to come aboard and try out.
Oh yeah,
audition.
absolutely. I'm always looking for hungry actors, collaborators, all that fun stuff. So my personal Instagram is Caden Butera. Just my first and last name, Caden with a C, and you can find me there. And that's the best place to find me.
Appreciate it, Caden. Has anyone spelled it with a K?
Only every Starbucks barista ever. And then I also forgot another good place to follow us, my production company, and the film itself is our website. So paradoxstudiosco.com is our website where you can sign up for our newsletter and be the first to know when Recollection is out. When can you click that watch now button? If you sign up for the newsletter, there's behind the scenes stuff, all sorts of things. I'm sure every update I have coming out soon is going to be going on to that newsletter.
Awesome. And we'll put all the links in the show notes for everyone so they can just click on it. They don't have to write it down or remember it. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much, Caden, for being on here.
Yeah, thank you.